You don't really want to be strong, not yet. Because if you did, you would have already chosen the one path that makes real strength possible, the path of solitude. But instead, you keep surrounding yourself with people. You keep looking for comfort in conversations, in likes, in relationships, in anything that keeps you from being alone. And the most dangerous part? You've convinced yourself that this is normal, that it's healthy, that it's what connection is supposed to look like. But deep down, a part of you knows. You're not connecting. You're hiding. You're not surrounded because you're powerful. You're surrounded because you're scared. You're addicted to support, to attention, to reassurance. You need someone to tell you what to do, how to feel, what you're worth. And maybe no one told you this before, so let me be the first. That's not strength. That's weakness, polished and camouflaged. We live in a world that sells codependency as love, that worships groupthink and calls it community. That tells you you're only valuable if you're liked. So you chase approval like a starving dog. You become the version of yourself that others expect, not the version you were meant to become. You shrink your truth. You hide your fire. Because if you dared to stand alone, even for a second, the silence might expose something you're not ready to face. And this is where it begins. The illusion of support. The myth that you need someone to make you feel valid. Maybe they were family. Maybe they were friends. Maybe they still are. But look closely. Are they lifting you, or are they keeping you small? Because here's a hard truth. Not all support is real support. Some people hold you close just enough to keep you from flying. They smile, they nod, they cheer you on, but only as long as you stay within the version of you that they can understand, control, or benefit from. Go 1 inch beyond that, and suddenly they go quiet. Suddenly, you're changing, you're acting different. That's not support. That's sabotage in disguise. And the more you need it, the more they control you. You stop making decisions based on your instincts and start making them based on fear. Fear of disappointing, fear of losing someone, fear of being seen as selfish. So you trade your power for permission. You wait, you shrink. You explain yourself constantly, hoping that your authenticity won't cost you your place in the group. But here's what they won't tell you. The version of you they love isn't even real. It's the edited, diluted, emotionally palatable version, the obedient version, the dependent version. And if that's the version you're protecting, then who the hell are you really? There is a moment, and it comes for everyone, where you will wake up in the middle of the night, surrounded by everything and everyone you've built around you, and still feel completely hollow. Not because you're broken, but because you're finally realizing that everything you've been doing was to avoid the one person you needed to face, yourself. You didn't choose silence. You didn't choose space. You didn't choose isolation. And so you never found your edge. You never discovered what you're made of. Because every time life tried to pull you into the wild, into the unknown, into the uncomfortable silence of solitude, you ran. You picked up the phone. You looked for noise. You looked for someone, anyone, to make the moment feel less sharp. And it worked. For a while. Until it didn't. If this message spoke to something deep inside you, let me know in the comments. I read every word. And if you felt this was a step forward in your journey, subscribe now so we can keep walking this path together. Because now you're tired. You can feel it. You're tired of not trusting your own voice. You're tired of constantly asking others what they think before you move. You're tired of needing to be seen just to feel alive. And maybe, just maybe, you're finally ready. Ready to stop hiding behind people. Ready to stop needing to be comforted every time reality feels too raw. Ready to stop calling weakness emotional intelligence. Ready to face the one place where real growth begins, alone. You want to be strong? Then learn to stand still in the storm with no one clapping for you. Learn to carry your wounds without needing to show them. Learn to act without asking. Speak without softening. Exist without explanation. True power is quiet. It doesn't need validation. It doesn't need a crowd. It doesn't need approval. It is built in silence, in rejection, in loneliness. And if you can survive that, if you can breathe in that, no one will ever be able to break you again. And this is only the beginning. Because once you're no longer afraid of silence, you'll finally start to hear what your life has been trying to tell you all along. Shall we go deeper? You say you want clarity. You say you're searching for answers. You talk about self-awareness, growth, and healing. But the moment everything around you gets quiet, you panic. The silence creeps in, and suddenly you need to check your phone. You need to play music. You need to call someone. You need distraction. Because the truth is, you don't actually want clarity. You want noise. You want just enough sound to drown out the parts of you that still hurt. Most people don't fear loneliness. They fear what loneliness reveals. Because in the silence, there are no masks, no roles to play, no expectations to meet. There is no one to impress, to convince, to perform for. There is only you, raw, unfiltered, and exposed. And that's terrifying. Not because you're weak, but because you've built your life avoiding that version of yourself. When the noise dies, the real you comes to the surface. And sometimes that version is angry. Sometimes it's ashamed. Sometimes it's insecure, afraid, lost. Sometimes it's all of that at once. But here's the paradox. If you never meet that version of yourself in silence, you'll never transform. You'll just keep managing symptoms, not healing the root. This is why solitude feels unbearable to so many people. Not because they're lonely, but because they're strangers to themselves. And being alone with a stranger, even when that stranger is you, is deeply uncomfortable. You can spend years studying personal development, reading books, quoting authors, attending seminars, and still be completely disconnected from your truth. Because knowledge means nothing if you're too afraid to sit still with it. You don't need another mindset hack or productivity system. You need courage. The kind of courage it takes to sit in a room by yourself, with no distractions, and not flinch when the memories come back, when the voices get loud, when the doubt rises, when the regret shows up, when the shame whispers your name. That's the battlefield. That's where self-mastery is forged, not in the crowd, not in the spotlight, but in the silence that strips everything away and shows you who you really are. Think about it. When was the last time you sat in complete silence for even 15 minutes? No phone, no music, no conversation. Just you, your breath, and your mind. Most people can't do it. They'll tell you it's boring, that they're just not wired for that. But what they're really saying is, I don't want to face myself. I don't want to feel what I've buried. I don't want to hear what I've been avoiding. But what if I told you that everything you're looking for, peace, clarity, direction, confidence, it's buried in that silence? What if the reason your life still feels chaotic is because you keep avoiding the one place where answers are actually found? Napoleon Hill understood this when he said, "Fears are nothing more than a state of mind." And what feeds that fear? Noise. The external chaos that keeps your internal chaos comfortable. You think staying busy keeps you productive, but often it's just another way to stay numb. You scroll endlessly, not because you're curious, but because you're running. You fill your calendar not because you're ambitious, but because you're scared to feel what happens when there's nothing left to do. You cling to conversations not because you crave connection, but because you fear silence might tell you something you're not ready to hear. But here's the truth. Most people never face. Silence is a mirror. It reflects everything, the good, the bad, the forgotten, the denied. And once you look into that mirror long enough, you begin to see what you've been pretending not to know. You start to see the patterns, the cycles, the places where you betrayed yourself just to feel safe. The moments you said yes when you wanted to scream no. The people you kept around just to avoid being alone, even though they were draining your soul. And the silence doesn't lie. It doesn't flatter you. It doesn't let you escape. But it does offer something priceless. Clarity. Not the kind that comes from someone else's opinion, but the kind that comes from your own gut finally being heard. That's the kind of clarity that changes lives. The kind that makes you walk away from comfort. The kind that makes you cut ties with people who don't see your worth. The kind that makes you stop chasing things you never even wanted. You just thought you were supposed to. But none of that is possible until you sit with the silence long enough to stop fearing it. And once that fear breaks, something beautiful happens. You begin to trust yourself again. You begin to hear your own voice, not just the echoes of everyone else's. You start making decisions from a place of conviction, not desperation. You stop reacting and start creating. You stop chasing approval and start moving with purpose. You realize that being alone is not punishment. It's preparation. For the life you were meant to lead, for the strength you were meant to embody, for the truth you were meant to live. And in that moment, when you no longer need noise to feel alive, you finally become someone who is truly untouchable. But solitude is only the beginning, because once you make peace with the silence, you're ready to face the next truth. No one is coming to save you. And that realization, that's where everything really starts to change. There comes a point where you have to face the truth that no one is coming. Not your friends, not your parents, not your partner, not the government, not your boss, no one. And the sooner you stop expecting someone to show up and rescue you from your chaos, the sooner you'll start becoming who you were always meant to be. Because waiting, hoping, for someone to fix it is the first chain you must break if you want to be free. You see, most people don't fail because they're incapable. They fail because they stay stuck in the mindset that someone owes them something, that someone should help, that life should be easier, that if they just wait long enough, pray hard enough, beg loud enough, things will change. But here's the reality. Life doesn't respond to need. It responds to movement. And if you're not moving, you're slowly dying. You've been sold a lie. That strength is something someone gives you. That clarity comes from others. That your breakthrough is in someone else's hands. So you wait. You scroll. You complain. You repeat the same story over and over again to anyone who will listen, hoping someone will finally understand your pain deeply enough to pull you out of it. But no one can. Because this part of the journey was never meant to be shared. This is the part where you walk alone. This is the part where you look around and realize that the people you thought would always be there have their own demons, their own scars, their own limitations, and maybe they love you, maybe they care, but they're not capable of carrying your weight, because they're barely carrying their own. And even if someone could save you, what would that really mean? That your growth came from outside of you? That your story only moved forward when someone else showed up? That you were just waiting to be rescued like some helpless version of yourself that never learned how to stand? No, that's not your path. You were not designed to be rescued. You were designed to rise. And rising starts with responsibility. The kind of responsibility most people run from their whole lives. The kind that says, even if it's not my fault, it's still my responsibility to change it. The kind that forces you to look at every area of your life and ask, where am I waiting for someone to fix this for me? Think about it. Are you waiting for someone to apologize before you heal? Are you waiting for the perfect opportunity to take the first step? Are you waiting for motivation, for support, for permission? Are you waiting for your circumstances to change before you start acting like the person you know you're meant to become? Because if you are, let me tell you something you already know but haven't accepted yet. You will wait forever. And maybe that's the point. Maybe the pain you feel right now, the weight, the disappointment, the frustration, is life's way of waking you up. Because nothing changes until you change. Nothing begins until you begin. No one is going to come into your life and fight your battles for you. And even if they try, you'll lose yourself in the process. Because you'll always wonder if it was really your victory, or just someone else carrying you across the finish line. Napoleon Hill understood this deeply. He didn't talk about relying on others. He didn't preach dependency. He talked about definiteness of purpose, about burning desire, about personal initiative. He knew that power comes from within, not from waiting, but from deciding, from taking control of your own mind, your own actions, your own life. His words were clear. The world has the habit of making room for the man whose words and actions show that he knows where he is going. And you? Do you know where you're going? Because the world is watching. Not with sympathy, not with understanding, but with indifference. It doesn't care how hard your past was. It doesn't care how unfair life has been. It cares about movement, effort, ownership. So you have a choice. You can stay where you are, surrounded by excuses, comforted by distractions, hoping for a miracle that may never come. Or you can stand up, face the cold, and move. Not perfectly, not all at once, but decisively. Because even the smallest step in the right direction breaks the chain of helplessness. Even the tiniest act of courage begins to dissolve the illusion that you're stuck. Let me be clear. This path is brutal. You'll want to quit. You'll cry. You'll doubt yourself. You'll feel alone. But you won't be alone. You'll be with the one person you were meant to face all along, yourself. And that confrontation, that's where the fire begins. Because once you realize that no one is coming, you become dangerous. You stop begging. You stop explaining. You stop waiting. And you start building. You start creating a life that isn't based on handouts or hope, but on discipline, resilience, and ownership. You stop asking, who will help me? And you start asking, what can I do with what I have right now? You stop saying, why is this happening to me? And you start saying, what am I going to do about it? You stop needing a savior, and you start becoming your own source of power. This is the turning point, the quiet war between who you've been and who you could become. But to keep walking, you'll have to leave behind everything that gave you comfort. You'll have to step into the dark, into the unknown, into the silence, and use every ounce of pain, betrayal, and disappointment as fuel. Because the discomfort you feel isn't a sign that you're failing. It's a sign that you're getting closer to the edge of who you used to be. And on the other side of that edge is the version of you that doesn't need saving anymore, only sharpening. I'd love to hear how this resonated with your story. Drop a comment below and tell me what part hit you the hardest. And don't forget to subscribe. This is just the beginning. And that sharpening, that real internal fire, it only begins when everything else is stripped away. When there's no applause, no audience, and no support. Just you, your breath, and the next step forward. And that's exactly where we're going next. Oh ChatGPT Disa, growth doesn't happen in the light. It doesn't happen when you're celebrated, applauded, or surrounded. It happens in the cold, in the dark, in the silence no one else sees. You want to become someone new? Then prepare to be stripped of everything that made you feel safe. The transformation you crave won't begin while you're comfortable. It begins when you're cracked open. And that crack, it's caused by one thing most people never want to face: isolation. Isolation isn't loneliness. It's not being alone for the sake of suffering. It's being alone long enough for the old noise to die and the new voice inside you to rise. It's the sacred space where your old identity begins to fall apart and your true self slowly starts to take shape. But make no mistake, this process will break you before it builds you. You'll feel like you're losing everything. People will drift away. Familiar routines will collapse. The things that once brought you pleasure will stop making sense. You'll look in the mirror and barely recognize yourself. And that's exactly how it's supposed to feel. That disorientation, that confusion, that aching emptiness. It means the mask is finally cracking. We spend our lives building identities we think will protect us. The good son, the strong one, the achiever, the lover, the peacemaker. But over time, those masks become cages. And when life starts to shake them loose, it's terrifying. Because even if they were suffocating you, they were still familiar. And we cling to the familiar, even when it's killing us. That's why people fight their own transformation. Not because they don't want to grow, but because they don't want to lose the version of themselves they've always known. Even if that version is broken, even if that version is built on pain, lies, and survival tactics. But here's the truth. The version of you that got you here is not the one that will take you further. And in order to evolve, you have to let that version die, piece by piece, belief by belief, scar by scar. And that death, it happens in solitude. Think about a caterpillar. When it goes into the cocoon, it doesn't just grow wings. It dissolves. It becomes unrecognizable, a soup of cells with no clear form. It's destroyed in order to be restructured. And that process? It happens in isolation. No audience, no applause, no external motivation. Just the quiet, hidden, painful undoing of everything it used to be. And we're the same. You can't rebuild yourself while you're still trying to be visible to everyone else. You can't become something new if you're still clinging to being understood by people who only knew the old you. The deeper you go into transformation, the lonelier it feels. Not because you're unloved, but because you're no longer compatible with what you used to tolerate. And this disconnection, this silence, this internal earthquake, it is your rebirth. but it requires endurance. Because just when you think you've endured enough, life will ask for more. It'll test your commitment. It'll test your patience. It'll strip you again. Not to punish you, but to make sure you're not pretending. To make sure your evolution is real and not just a performance. In this phase, nothing external can guide you. No mentor, no video, no quote. Only your own breath, your own fire, your own willingness to sit in the confusion long enough for clarity to emerge from within. And if you can do that, if you can resist the urge to escape, to distract, to numb, something starts to shift. Slowly, quietly, the noise inside begins to calm. The pressure transforms into purpose. The discomfort becomes direction. You start to make peace with the silence. You stop fighting the solitude. You begin to understand that isolation isn't a punishment. It's a portal. And only those who endure the void get to walk through it. This is where your new identity begins to form. It doesn't shout. It doesn't need validation. It whispers. It guides. It rebuilds you from the inside out. You begin to move differently. You don't need permission anymore. You don't ask for confirmation. You know. You decide. You lead. And even if the people around you don't understand you anymore, even if they say you've changed, you stop needing them to get it. Because you're no longer trying to fit into a world you've already outgrown. You realize that the cost of staying the same was far greater than the pain of transformation. And with that realization, you start to detach, not from love, not from humanity, but from the need to be understood. You stop craving company just to fill the silence. You stop performing for people who don't even know who they are. You stop apologizing for your depth, your fire, your standards. Because you've been through the darkness. You've sat in the silence. You've bled, broken, and rebuilt. And now you walk with a different kind of strength. Not loud, not arrogant, but rooted, quiet, unshakable. You no longer need to explain who you are. You simply show it, and the world begins to respond differently. Not because it changed, but because you did. But there's one more test waiting. The final layer that will determine whether this transformation is real or just temporary. Because after you've rebuilt yourself in silence, the world will try to pull you back into the noise, into the crowd, into the comfort of who you used to be. And what you do next will define everything. Oh, ChatGPT, Disa, they will try to pull you back, not because they're evil, not because they want to see you fail, but because your transformation threatens everything they haven't faced in themselves. When you stop explaining yourself, you become a mirror. When you stop seeking approval, you become unpredictable. And when you stop apologizing for your power, you become a reminder of everything they could be if they stopped hiding too. You will feel it, the tug, the old voices, the old invitations, the old patterns knocking on your door with a smile, pretending nothing has changed. But you have. And now you must decide, do you walk forward into the unknown, into the life you've built in the dark, or do you shrink again to fit into a world that no longer fits you? This is the final battle, not with others, with yourself, the version of you that was trained to play small, the version that was afraid of being alone, the version that craved safety more than growth. That version won't go quietly. It will try to convince you that you're being too cold, too distant, too intense, too much. But that voice is a ghost, a shadow, and you are no longer its prisoner. Because now, you know that solitude wasn't a curse, it was a teacher. You know that silence wasn't empty, it was full of answers. You know that pain wasn't punishment, it was preparation. You didn't just survive isolation, you were remade in it. And now you move differently. You speak with precision. You listen without reacting. You choose your path without asking for directions. You've stopped seeking love in places that only offered tolerance. You've stopped shrinking just to be held. You've stopped explaining yourself to people committed to misunderstanding you. And in that stillness, you found a weapon more powerful than any applause. Peace. Not the kind that comes from everything going right. The kind that comes from knowing you can handle everything going wrong. The kind that can't be taken because it was built in the fire. You are no longer afraid of being misunderstood. You are no longer waiting to be rescued. You are no longer addicted to being needed because you've met yourself in the silence and you decided you were enough. And now, you are free. So what happens next? You rise. Not loudly, not desperately, but fully, authentically, relentlessly. You walk through the world with quiet authority, not asking for space, but being the space. People will feel it. They won't know what changed. They'll just know that you are not someone they can control anymore. You're not someone who needs to be liked. You're someone who knows who they are, and that in itself is terrifying to the world. But also, it's magnetic. Because when you live without needing others to complete you, you become the kind of person others are drawn to. Not because you're trying to attract anyone, but because people crave what you found: alignment, clarity, wholeness. Was there a moment in this video that felt like it was meant for you? Share it in the comments. Your words might be exactly what someone else needs today. And if you haven't already, hit that subscribe button. There's more coming, and you don't want to miss it. You don't need to chase love anymore. You are love. You don't need to beg for attention. You are attention. You don't need to be chosen. You already chose yourself. That is the final step. And it's not the end. It's the beginning. Because now, your life becomes your message. Your presence becomes your proof. Your silence becomes your strength. And everything you touch will feel that transformation. So thank you for walking this far, for choosing the hard road, for facing yourself when it would have been easier to run. This journey isn't for everyone, but it is for you. And if this message found you in the dark, I hope it lit a fire that never goes out. Now take that fire and step into the next part of your evolution. Because your next breakthrough is already waiting for you, in the next video right here on the screen, and I'll meet you there. Thank you for being here. Thank you for becoming who you were always meant to be. I'll see you soon.